Lord Celesant, a mighty hero with a girl's name. So what I like to do for these series of tutorials is actually cover all of the steps it takes to actually paint a miniature. And we're talking here about display quality miniatures. You could definitely apply it to tabletop miniatures or even something that you're learning. But I think this is kind of the process that it takes to actually build and paint a nice showcase miniature. And so I don't see a lot of tutorials covering the prepping process, assembling process. They go straight out painting, and I think that's something that's missed. And I'll admit, when I first started painting miniatures, I really didn't do a lot of prep work on the miniatures. I would just essentially sometimes prime it. When I first started, I didn't even prime. First thing I started doing was putting the paint on. Then I learned priming is important. When I heard some of the steps that people did to prep the miniature, I thought that was excessive. But what I realized is, as I got better, as I learned to thin my paints to the right consistency, I found that the prep work is very, very important. And you'll see that is actually the case for almost anything you do in life. You see that from carpentry to crafts to even engineering. The better your prep is, the foundation in which you establish your work, the better your overall product is. And so I don't plan on making a lot of these videos or tutorials. They're not very exciting, but I think they're important enough that they should be covered more than they are actually covered in the hobby. So with that said, let's move on to the tutorial. When extracting the miniature from the mold, I use a sharp X-Acto knife. This is a brand new blade typically I put on. Now it might seem counterintuitive using a brand new blade, but a brand new blade helps you in that you have to apply less force to cut the miniature out of the mold. And what that does is it prevents you from actually carving into the miniature. It also makes it easy to score, so if the plastic is too thick to cut, you could just score the plastic around the joints where you want to extract the miniature and just bend it, and it'll bend right at the cut. The second part, and is the most important part, but it's counterintuitive, is a sharper blade is safer to cut with than a dull blade. And the reason why is you need more force to cut with a dull blade. Now for plastic, you'll notice the force difference, but when it comes to human flesh, a dull X-Acto knife will cut through flesh just as easy as a sharp X-Acto knife. Okay, so the technique I use for cleaning the mold lines is what I call a carve and scrape technique. Essentially, the sharp knife allows you to easily carve out the flasks that are still attached to the miniatures, the scrape technique is kind of like a sanding process, a very, very coarse sanding process that allows to get the protruding parts of the plastic out. It helps remove the mold lines that might not be so bad, but still noticeable to the human eye. And so I go ahead and use that whole carving and scrape technique. So most of the time when working with plastic, I typically use rubber cement. It's that red glue that you find at most hobby stores. And the nice thing about that glue is it melts the plastic and welds the two plastic joints together. It's ideal for heavy pieces and also for miniatures that get a lot of wear on them. But because this miniature is a showpiece, I went ahead and that's not essential, and so I went ahead and used crazy glue. And the advantage of crazy glue is that it sets a lot faster, making it easier for me to assemble. Okay, so after I finished assembling the mount and giving the miniature a second pass over just to make sure that I didn't miss any flash or mold lines, I move on to Lord Celesant, and I extract him and all of his accessories such as the shields, banners, scarves, and etc. Okay, so I clean and assemble Lord Celesant. Now, one thing that's very important is I do not attach him to the mount. You'll see in the painted tutorials, I'm going to keep the mount, Lord Celesant, and his head separate so that I could get to each one of those sections easy and not have one part block the other. Come back soon for part 2, which should be coming soon. This is what I consider prepping the canvas right before we apply the paint. Please remember that any form of feedback does help me out. So if you like this channel, please subscribe. If you liked the video, hit the thumbs up. If you didn't like it, hit the thumbs down or leave a comment. That's it. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next video.